video is going to bring back one of my favorite skills. It's actually the first skill I started off playing on my Berserker last league in... I don't even remember what last league was. Expedition League, yeah. But basically, Frostblades is the best skill, period. After trying out all of the strike skills from both last league and this league. But there's a caveat to it, and the caveat is that you need to have enough single target damage to make it so that you actually do enough damage to kill everything without having to rely on the higher damage effectiveness of all Lightning Strike and Lightning Strike. So basically, Frostblades is the best skill in the game, and it feels the best to clear. And some of the reasons behind that is the fact that Frostblades has a built-in plus 22 melee strike range. So I don't know if you guys remember yesterday's video about Wild Strike and how Wild Strike had the issue where sometimes you can't attack because the mob is not nearby enough. Well, Frostblades pretty much has no issue. Like, there's pretty much no reason for Frostblades to attack if the mob is not within your strike range, because that means the mob is way too far away anyhow. And another thing about Frostblades is the possibility of using Awakened Chain on easier content. For instance, in these Simulacrums, I swap in Awakened Chain probably for Awakened added lightning damage, meaning I need to get a white socket on this. An Awakened Chain makes the clear just absolutely crazy. Probably some of the best clear that I've played on any build in quite a while, and this was the case last league, and that's why people tried out Eternity Shroud with Touch of Anguish, because Chain is just that insane. So the name of the game for this league to me now is to just get enough damage so that you can use Awakened Chain full time. It was actually pretty easy to get 6 waves on Simulacrum when I put an Awakened Chain on some of the layouts, or 6 reward layers I mean. And it is a complete game changer. I do think that a lot of people do like Frostblades more than Lightning Strike. They just don't know how to play it. And like, Frostblades is just a much more fun skill to play, right? I never really hear anyone ever complain about, oh, Frostblade sucks. I don't like how it gets stuck on pebbles. I don't like how it gets stuck on stairs. I don't like how it gets stuck on rocks. But there's so many people who won't even give Lightning Strike a try, because immediately they just tell me, oh, is there any alternative to Lightning Strike? I just hate how it gets stuck on pebbles, rocks, trees, and everything. And Frostblades is just completely different. You could be attacking here, and the projectiles can chain all the way to up here, allowing for actually off-screen clear. I kind of fell out of love with Frostblades as I was doing this one map called Promenade, or not Frostblade, Lightning Strike, while I was doing the Valdo's Rest Promenade, and that's when I started asking myself, is there life outside of Lightning Strike? Because Lightning Strike was pretty bad, honestly, after a while of playing it, in terms of just the terrain difference making a huge big difference. And also, a lot of people always ask me to compare like Raider and Berserker for Frostblade, or like Lightning Strike. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, Raiders, but Raider is gonna have a lot harder time getting enough damage on Frostblades. Because guess what? You guys already do like a half or a third damage of the Berserker. So when you start doing even less damage of a total, because the skill has a worse damage effectiveness, then the skill is probably not gonna be viable, right? So that's actually the main difference between Raider and Berserker. It allows you to experiment with different skills because your Ascendancy can actually do a lot of damage. But let's get straight into Frostblades, what I made to make the skill bearable. And there are certain things with the skill that actually translates over to Lightning Strike. So Frostblades gear, right? So you might think I got a lot of different pieces of gear to change up for Frostblades, but the fact of the matter is that I didn't even do anything. And man, my stash jobs are a complete mess. So if someone wants to help sell some of my stash items, let me know. But basically, Frostblades links. So there's a Frostblades gem 2120. You could technically, there's an alternate quality that shoots additional projectiles that I think is probably better if you have enough damage. Awakened elemental damage with attacks is necessary. Nightblade support gem, Trinity, Awakened multi-strike, anomalous inspiration for the crit chance, and it does help out. Level 21 anomalous inspiration only gives 1% reduced mana cost, so it's not really necessary to get. And Awaken multi-strike, of course, and Awaken added lightning damage in the blue gem socket of Unatol's. Now,
I cannot do this yet.
So there's a little problem here, right? You might be wondering, why am I not using Awaken added cold damage? And you can see Awaken added cold damage is over here, and Awaken chain is over here. Well, the problem behind Awaken added cold damage is the fact that if you use Awaken added cold damage, let's just take out Nightblade for now, you will see that the cold damage range is 7,817 to 12,379. So when you're trying to proc Trinity, you need to have 2 elements be able to get the highest damage. So since the low end of cold damage is higher than both the high end of lightning damage and fire damage, it is actually impossible to ever proc Trinity. So even though Awaken added cold damage might seem like the highest DPS support gem on Path of Building, it just ends up not being the case because you will never proc Trinity and you'll never actually have the resonance. So that's one of the techs, is to not use Awaken added cold damage. Now, if you don't have Unato's amulet, you probably will have to find a way to fit Awaken added lightning damage in. As you can see here, without this lightning damage gem, you actually don't do any lightning damage, which is another huge problem, right? So even though like the actual tooltip will seem lower, having the inspiration charges only ends up being a 3% damage difference between having Awaken added cold versus inspiration. So we added inspiration instead of Awaken added cold damage so that our cold damage range is better. What this also means is that you have a higher crit chance, so for some of the Simulacrum ways, you'll feel a lot more consistent, especially when we don't have 15 brittle. So this is actually a pretty good swap, I feel like. And most importantly, our mana cost for Frostblaze is 13 now. And it does turn out, when I was playing Lightning Strike, I do think that mana cost was actually a huge issue that kind of went unaddressed. And I do think after looking back on some of the footage and just looking at the DPS numbers, something wasn't really adding up, right? Because theoretically, according to the DPS numbers, Lightning Strike should be nearly like 100 mil DPS ability with both the strike and projectile. But it does seem like the mana cost was kind of owning us, because you attack so fast, there's no way you can actually sustain a 40 mana cost ability, right? So using inspiration will be a huge benefit. So I don't know if you guys are playing Lightning Strike, you might want to try to find a way to cut down the mana cost, because I did realize the damage being absolutely insane both on Maven and on Simulacrum once I lowered the mana cost, even though supposedly the POB damage was lower. So I do think mana cost is probably messing you guys up a little bit. So how can you actually fix that? Inspiration is one way of doing it. Without inspiration, it's at 18. But you can also see that Replica Conqueror's efficiency gives me -9. You can also craft -8 on your ring. So between that, it actually helps out in freeing up a gem socket. Because you can see here we're using Life Tap. So Whirling Blades actually cost 1 mana. General's Cry costs 6 mana. Berserker costs 7. So if you craft -7 on a ring, then you're able to have free skills and not have to use Life Tap at all. And this helps out a lot because a lot of times you're Whirling Blade through the map and you're actually just losing life, right? So that's actually a huge benefit. So try to fit in some reduced mana cost on your gear, whether through Replica Conqueror's efficiency or mana cost craft, and even trying to use inspiration. I don't know if it's the best thing to do on Lightning Strike. But I do think if you have a problem with having too much cold damage or something like that, because you have Blizzard Crowd, you could try dropping Awaken added cold and adding inspiration. It'll probably feel a lot more consistent. Now, besides that, the rest of the gear is pretty similar. We have the Claw, and so this one is Fire and Cold. We're still running the auras of Anger, Determination, Precision. Now, the one thing we did add, and what I did was to fix the single target a little bit, was I added in Summon Skitterbots. And what Summon Skitterbots does is it actually provides a 19% shock on the enemies. And what this means is that we pretty much have 19% more damage when Skitterbots is activated on a single target, which is absolutely crazy. What I ended up doing was dropping Defiance Banner. I did feel like Defiance Banner was worth dropping for 19% more damage. So a lot of the people who mention, oh, Raider's better because they can shock, well, their shock is barely better now, right? So it's not too big of a deal. Now, because we want to use Summon Skitterbots and it's Divergent Summon Skitterbots, I used a level 4 Enlighten, and this gem is more expensive than almost anything in the game. So we have Divergent Summon Skitterbots, Enlighten, Determination, and Anger. and then we have Precision Link somewhere else. And I also bought Anomalous Blood Rage to keep up frenzy charges on bosses, and this does happen all the time. Now you might be wondering, why am I doing these upgrades now? The fact of the matter is Frostblade needs the damage more than Lightning Strike, right? So that's why I'm finally upgrading my gear a little bit. And most of these upgrades are just gems, and they actually cost quite a bit. I think Enlighten level 4 is 15x. You might be able to get away with a level 3, especially with Inspiration. You just have to play around with it. Now, also, let's see what we have here. So the flasks are pretty much all the same for Frostblades. Now, you could technically use a Frostblades jewel, threshold jewel. You can put it over here or over here if you're not using Thread of Hope. So there are a few places for it, but because our damage is mostly a pretty like even mix, is not exactly the best use of it. I do think that if you can get a CB one, it is not too bad. It also gives you some prod speed, so I'll probably try to fit it in. Probably need to get a little bit better gear to use some of this stuff, because right now I have some major int issues, but int is actually a big problem that's kind of solved by, I mean, the main problem with int is that we have too much. Before, I was running the Wrath Aura in order to try to get enough int, and Hydra Spear, you do not want to level it up because Hydra Spear actually has a pretty high int requirement. Now, lastly, let's see, what do we have here? So basically, Frostblades ends up being probably one of the most satisfying skills I've personally played. You can also down level the precision a little bit to get it to 18, and I'm still at 100% hit. So right now, in terms of upgrades, what I'm looking for is definitely a better ring, because I really want to be able to craft that minus mana cost on the ring just to get a free gem socket from that. But basically, the playstyle of Frostblade is something that people ask me a lot. And even though you don't have Vol Lightning Strike, there is a benefit in that you only have one Vol skill. And when you only have one Vol skill, that means your skill will recharge faster. So on a single target, you can see that putting down this Vol Ancestral Warchief Totem ends up being a pretty substantial damage increase. So that actually ends up helping us on single target a lot of times, because we're able to get the Vol Ancestral Warchief up a lot more often. And this does help out on like Kostis or Omniphobia or stuff like that. But next up, I wanted to talk about how you can maximize your single target if you're really struggling, because there's actually a huge trick that you can do. So this part of the video kind of applies to both Frostblades and Lightning Strike, and after this part I will showcase the wave 29 and 30 on Simulacrum, not cherry picked and with like double life mods, and the Frostblades just absolutely destroyed it with these changes to the character, both because I have skitter bots and also because I have Anomalous Blood Rage, and just because of a little bit of upgrades, and also mainly because I'm not having any more dead casts with mana, right? And having dead casts with mana is pretty much having like 60% chance to hit. So now we're done with that. Let's talk about the playstyle of Frostblades. Playstyle of Frostblades is pretty similar, but put down 2 totems, and then you have to put down the Hydra Spear at times, and then you have to hit the Hydra Spear with the boss there in order to hit it with both the melee component and the projectile component. So say like this thing is the boss over here, so you will hit the boss with the strike, and you'll hit the Hydra Spear with your strike and shoot out projectiles that will hit the boss. It's very important for the Hydra Spear to be like slightly in front of the boss. Isn't like the end of the world, but this also helps, it gives you exposure. Now, one thing that is probably a lot of people's problem is the fact that you have General's Cry on left click. General's Cry on left click is probably fine with some other button on Withering Step. So right now when you map, a lot of people just spam like Withering Step and Berserk whenever it's up. But you can see here, the problem with General's Cry a lot of times, if you press it on left click, is that you will have bad usage of it, because every time you use General's Cry when you're above 25 rage, you will lose 10 rage. So for bossing, right, you're waiting for a boss to come and you're moving around, and you start to fight at like very low rage, and it's kind of annoying. So what I recommend is, this might take a little bit of getting used to, is to manually press General's Cry on boss fights. Now this will probably take a little bit of getting used to, but it will help your Berserk uptime a lot. And sometimes it's just not possible to be able to use General's Cry on left click and be able to keep up Berserk the whole time. But doing this one trick alone made me able to do wave 30 Simulacrum very easily. just because I was actually able to maintain the Berserk uptime that's actually possible on the build. And Berserk is an insane damage multiplier, right? So being able to keep it up is crazy. You do have to just keep up. Just make sure to press Generous Cry whenever your rage drops below 25. And try to move around a little bit so you can reset the elusive as much as possible. And overall, this just makes for a much, much better bossing experience. And you will notice the damage a lot. I do know a lot of people struggle with single target. And honestly, this is the solution to single target. So if you're doing like a Maven fight, you're doing Cyrus or something, then having this alone will be huge, even while playing Lightning Strike. Because while playing Lightning Strike, you can make sure you don't press General's Cry until the start of the fight. You immediately press D and then your Berserk button, and then your totems, and then like put down your Vol Lightning Strike, and you will be at maximum, rage throughout, and Berserk during the entire fight. Now the reason why this happens is because of the fact that sometimes when you play with a Generous Cry on left click, right? So say you start the fight, and then like your Generous Cry comes off cooldown, and you press it when you're at 30 rage, and that just bricks you. So whatever you accidentally press Generous Cry on left click with 30 rage, you pretty much just lose like 8 seconds or 10 seconds of Berserk. So right now, say that you do it right here. Even if you are spamming left click, you can't get it back up in time. That's actually a huge point of contention. I bet you that's where a lot of people have trouble with bossing, is that their Berserk uptime is actually atrocious because they're unable to, because they press the General's Cry at an inopportune time that just makes their Berserk run out. And that is actually a huge damage loss. So try to keep that in mind when trying it out. But now I'm going to showcase a Wave 2930 Simulacrum on Frostblades, which was actually one of the easiest I've done in a while. But yeah.
Just like a spark that's breaking out. Can't make a stop, can't turn back now. We know that there's no room for doubt. No, we can't turn back now. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we gonna light it up tonight. We gonna light it up, babe. Tonight we gonna light it up just like the sunrise. We gonna light it up now.
Broken alone, I feel the rain crashing down. All around this empty town, I'm searching for the lost and found. But you don't care, you're unaware. Keep moving like the scars aren't even there. It's in the air, like a blazing flare. Just stare, cause the flames will burn us. I thought you were the one for me. That's why I gave you everything. Held you close by the stormy seas. Oh, you meant the world to me. I used to kiss your head when
Anyhow, I hope everyone liked the footage. I will film a lot more Frostblades. Frostblades is the best clear in the game for me personally, hands down, just because you can use Awakened Chain on easier content, which is pretty much anything but Simulacrum Wave 30 and bosses. And it will be insane if you try it out in a 100% deli map. I'll try to film some tomorrow or today, but yeah, I hope all these little tips from me optimizing Frostblades to be able to be used has helped out people play Lightning Strike. And this video does inspire people to upgrade their gear and to try out Frostblades instead of Lightning Strike, because let's be real, Lightning Strike, the reason why Lightning Strike's damage is so high and is effectiveness is so high is because it has some glaring issues, being the fact of pebbles and kind of mediocre clear at times. And while Frostblade just has some of the best clear in the game, anyone who just plugs in a gem, if you just plug in a gem for a little bit, go do a map, you'll notice immediately. Even though your single target might be worse, the skill is much more enjoyable to play. But thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you find more Mage Bloods and Mirrors than me, and see you next time. Bye.